Hey there, folks. I'm Parker Thune. That's Jesse Crittenden. Look, we know, we get it. Oklahoma played a terrible football game on Saturday against Houston. Miraculously, they escaped with a win, but it was ugly. And we've broken it down from so many different angles. We've scrutinized everything that there is to scrutinize. But we know that in the aftermath of performances like this one from the Sooners, you, the fan, love to be heard. And so we're going to let you be heard today on this installment of Quick Slants. Many of you took to the OUinsider.com message board over the weekend to voice your opinions, throw out your hot takes on the Sooners play, what needs to be fixed, how it can be fixed, etc. And so we have chosen 5 lucky posters from OUinsider.com whose takes we are going to read and discuss. I would categorize all of these as hot takes. They're not outlandish, but some strong opinions voiced, and we'll break them down. Starting with this post from Sooner Sports Till the End, who says, I've never been a hot take guy and call for people's jobs, and I've been a Bill Bedenbaugh defender for the last few years, but I rewatched the game last night and woke up pissed off. The University of Oklahoma can't put together an offensive line that can average more than 3 yards a carry. Gabe Eichert talking about how guys don't know their assignments and are just not physical enough. Third and fourth year guys don't know what guy to block. Are we effing serious? G5 schools have a better run game than OU has had the last 2 years. Was Jackson Arnold great Saturday? No. But most of the problems on offense all come from not being able to run the damn ball. I do not care about losing recruits if it means not having to watch this crap fest run game 3 years in a row. He didn't say crap fest. I sanitized that. But fair, Jesse, to question the work that Bill Bedenbaugh is doing right now or not?
I certainly wouldn't say it's unfair, and I don't know how you could watch Saturday's game and how much the offense struggled and necessarily say any criticism of anybody is off the table. I mean, look, this is an OU offense that averaged 2.6 yards per carry against Houston. You go back to last season where they were one of the worst rushing defenses in the country. Last week against UNLV, they gave up almost 200 yards rushing. They gave up over 4 yards per carry. Even with the injuries on OU's offensive line, there was no indication that they not only would struggle, but basically that their running game would be anemic. To me, Parker, there's a disconnect with everything OU's trying to do. There's whether it's the zone run schemes, whether it's the RPOs that they're running, nothing is in sync. And then you add on that the injuries to the offensive line are there, and it's just nothing's working. I think the best case, or I think the best way to look at it, Parker, is that first play of the game, that Deion Burks jet sweep that not only lost 6 yards, but in the moment it looked like Josh Bates just missed a block, which he did. If you go back and watch that play, that assignment that he was asked to do on that play was unlikely he was going to be able to make that block. So to me, yeah, Bill Bedenbaugh probably deserves some criticism. The offensive line, the running backs, I don't think the running backs are doing a great job hitting the hole. I don't think they're doing a good job of improvising. I don't think Seth Luttrell's schemes and formations are working. There's just an overall disconnect. And to me, I think it was dire enough considering how bad Houston's defense is. To me, it's dire enough that, and it's so hard to do this before week 3, I think you have to evaluate everything that this offense is trying to do and probably make some systemic changes from top to bottom.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, fair to question Bill Bedenbaugh's work right now, I guess. Like, I'm not going to tell you, it's similar to what Jesse said. I'm not going to tell you that any criticism of anyone is misplaced right now, because there are a lot of issues that reared their ugly heads for this football team on Saturday. I will say this, though. It's going to be difficult, and it would be difficult for anybody in Bill Bedenbaugh's shoes to make chicken salad out of chicken crap when you're down your starting center in Branson Hickman, the guy that you brought in via the transfer portal to solidify your offensive line, that unit as a whole. You're down a guy that made starts at guard last year for you in Troy Everett, another guy with plenty of FBS starting experience in Garen Hatchett that was going to be a starter at guard. And then your right tackle, Jake Taylor, whom we saw briefly, but then he exited the game on Saturday. That's four guys that could all very realistically be in the starting lineup, and two for sure that are in the starting lineup, no questions asked, that are on the shelf right now. So when you're that banged up, it's going to be difficult. That said, regardless of what the circumstances are, your task as a coach is to figure it out. And, I will give credit where credit is due. Bill Bedenbaugh very evidently had the same takeaway following week one that all of us had, which is no more Spencer Brown. And so when Jake Taylor left the game on Saturday, he slid Michael Tarquin to right tackle and Logan Howland entered the game at left tackle. So there's a lot to figure out. And I think that's more where I stand on it. Is there anything that Bill Bedenbaugh has done to this point that I would categorize as wrong, save for putting Spencer Brown out there in week one? No, but it's more just a learning process right now. Who can you trust? How can you cobble together a starting five in the absence of some guys that you were relying on to start and make an impact for you up front? Kind of along the same lines, our second post comes from noted doomer Roughnecks1, who says, EPL is better than any O lineman we have and can be with the game reps. Sexton is a better offensive tackle. Get him an EPL on the left side and tell 54 to get stronger and better. That's Fabechi Wee-Woo, by the way. I knew when we lost Caden Green and Bird, and to top it off, dumb Rame left early for no reason, it would be a problem. You must pay your O lineman, or you get C minus, D plus O lineman, and that's where we're at. I will say this before I let Jesse say his piece. It felt like a dumb move at the time, but Andrew Rame made the Carolina Panthers 53-man roster, so he bet on himself and it worked out. But I agree, that is one guy that you would like to have around right now if you're Oklahoma. Your thoughts, Jesse?
No, I mean, look, I agree with them about, I agree with them, especially about Jacob Sexton at tackle. That's clearly his natural position. That's where he has the most experience. That's where he would be best on this offensive line. It's not that Bill Bedenbaugh doesn't want to play him there. I think when you look at this offensive line and this depth chart from top to bottom, it's hard with the pieces that he has to get Sexton at tackle, because it makes it puts everywhere. It puts a bunch of stuff into motion, and it's clear that Bill Bedenbaugh thinks this offensive line as a unit, not about where Jacob Sexton can succeed best individually, but where this offensive line can be as a unit with him at guard. However, I would say I think it's still clear they're trying to figure stuff out. They're trying to figure out combinations of what works. I understand the Eddie Pierre-Louis. I understand people calling for that. I've seen that a lot. My basic thing would be to say I think one of the toughest things you could do to an O-line that's essentially brand new, that's struggling, is to throw a true freshman with no game reps into the mix.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that couldn't work. I'm just saying that is a much easier thing to say than to actually implement on the field.
Caden Green wrecked a lot of people's perspective in that regard. EPL, for all we know, he could be the next Caden Green, or he could be a green true freshman that gets his teeth kicked in by SEC defensive linemen because he's just not ready yet. There's a reason why the true freshmen that have played on the offensive line for Bill Bedenbaugh at Oklahoma are very few and very far between. It is a lot to ask of a true freshman at any position, but especially on the offensive line. I will say this, someone, and evidently someone much smarter than I, will have to explain how Michael Tarquin, who started for an entire season at left guard for Florida, is suddenly incapable of playing left guard, and he has to be the left tackle, and Jacob Sexton has to be the one that you slide to left guard. Why Tarquin can't play left guard and Sexton can't play left tackle, that does not add up. I can't equate that in my head.
It's fair. And so that's, to me, and I think the hardest thing is you would love to be able to figure this stuff out before the season, but you're 2 weeks into the season now, and you're going up against a Tulane team that's going to be a step up significantly from Houston and Temple. And Parker, the undercurrent of all of this concern and all the criticisms and all the worries is that this season is just different. We've seen offensive lines under Bill Bedenbaugh. We saw it last year that as the season goes on, they get better and better. Think of the running struggles the team had last season through the first 6 games of the year. Not only was it ineffective, but they didn't even know who their best running back is. Then the second half of the season, Gavin Sawchuk takes off. The running game is a strong part of the team. You've seen that growth at times, and you've seen this offensive line figure it out. OU doesn't really have that time this year, not only because of the way they've looked the first two games, but because the SEC's here. It's no longer a future thing. It's starting in less than 2 weeks. And so all that, there's a million things I could say, but I agree with you. I mean, Jacob Sexton would be best at tackle. It would be hard to shift course now, but at this point, I think you got to look at everything. Tarquin has experience at guard. That is one thing I agree with you. Doesn't make sense.
Our next comment is a more concise one. This comes from user BoomerLaw25. He says, I love this team. I think Jackson is still a pup who needs experience. I also believe in the defense. With that being said, Tennessee is going to kick our derriere when they come to Norman. This offense is inept, and we're going to pay for it. I guess the crux of the point there and the question that I might spin it into, Jesse, is can this team beat an SEC opponent, the likes of Tennessee, in their current state? Is there any hope of that?
No, they won't win a game in SEC play if they play like they did on Saturday.
Well, yeah, if they play like they did on Saturday,
they won't. They're not. Yeah, they're not going to. I mean, I keep on telling this to people I've talked with the last couple of days. It's hard to overstate how bad Houston is. Like, they are a really, really bad football team. There were no indications OU was going to struggle like that. I don't think it's impossible that OU could get some stuff figured out this weekend, look good against a decent Tulane team, and things feel a lot better. Parker, you and I have seen a million times how much things can change in 1 week of football, how much the narrative can change, how much the vibes can change. Having said that, OU played an F game on offense on Saturday. They're going to need to play like a B, because at minimum, because as good as the defense was on Saturday, you cannot expect them to play that dominant, that mostly lights out, that efficient from start to finish against any SEC team, let alone a good team like Tennessee. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying you can't expect that. So they're going to have to get a lot better if they want to contend. I mean, that's saying the most obvious thing I could.
I'm with you, man. It's either you're going to have to hold the defense to an unrealistically high standard in order to have the expectation that Oklahoma wins a lot of football games in the SEC, or the offense is going to have to make some major strides, and that starts Saturday against Tulane. Post number 4 from user What a Win. I just watched Jackson Arnold's post game. The kid looks to have zero confidence and looks lost. That scares the hell out of me. We are entering the tougher part of our schedule, and we seem to be going backwards already. FJC, we in trouble, people. So I guess what we can take from that, what we can discuss relative or relevant to that post, Jesse, is what is wrong with Jackson Arnold's confidence right now, and how can that be fixed?
Look, this goes back to something I've said and we've said a billion times since before the season started. The circumstances for Jackson Arnold heading into this season is unlike almost any we've seen for an Oklahoma quarterback. To not only be a true sophomore with one career start to being named as the starting quarterback, you're heading into the first season in the SEC with one of the toughest schedules in the country. And you're doing that behind a brand new offensive line and a new offensive coordinator who didn't recruit you to campus. Having said all of that, this is about the worst start that Jackson Arnold, I mean, aside from a loss or two, actually, this is about as bad of a start as it could have been, to add to all those circumstances I just said, for Jackson Arnold to come out and he doesn't look comfortable. And I think part of that is the offensive line's in flux. The running game is essentially non-existent, and none of the things that this offense has done has tailored to Jackson Arnold's strengths at all. His strengths are, yes, his mobility, or at least a little bit of mobility, but it's his ability to throw the ball downfield. And now you're throwing basically 4 of the 5 top receivers on the depth chart didn't play on Saturday. And not only did they not play, they all have size. 4 of the 5 guys that played on Saturday, 4 of the 5 receivers are under 5'10". So no guys that are going to be necessarily good candidates to make plays all the way down the field. I mean, Jackson Arnold's attempted 10 passes beyond 20 yards. He's completed 2 of them. So basically, I think it's the one thing that you could hope for a true sophomore like this in these kind of conditions is for everything to be stable. If the offensive line was healthy, if the wide receivers were healthy, if there was more connection between Seth Luttrell, Jackson Arnold, and the offense as a whole, none of that has happened. So to me, it's not really a surprise that he doesn't look that confident and that he hasn't expressed a ton of confidence. The problem is they're right. The schedule's only going to get harder. So I actually think more than anything, getting the running game going, more than anything, this getting healthy, anything they need to do this weekend, it's Seth Luttrell's number one goal needs to be getting an offensive game plan that puts Jackson Arnold in a comfortable place to get into rhythm and find success. That's honestly the number one goal.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are reasons why a young quarterback's confidence level would be jeopardized when you take a look at the attrition that they have endured thus far this young season in the wide receiver room and up front. I get it if you're a little antsy about your protection. I get it if you're a little bit antsy about throwing a downfield ball to a receiver that you don't have complete trust in. But I also think there's still not there's still not much of an excuse for Jackson Arnold to have issues with confidence against a team like Houston, which, as you mentioned, is just a bad football team. I mean, we've seen a confident Jackson Arnold in the past, and a confident Jackson Arnold, whether it's been at the high school level or at the collegiate level, he's been a lethal dude. I don't understand why, just knowing that he plays his best, especially knowing that he plays his best when he does have that air of swagger and confidence about him, why he can't muster that up against Houston. The mentality in my mind should be, we're going to walk on the field, we're going to blow the doors off. We're going to blow this team out of the water. And you should be able to do that. And yes, the circumstances health-wise across the rest of the unit don't help, but that's one thing that, regardless of what the excuse is, what the explanation is, Jackson Arnold just has to come out against Tulane this Saturday and look more confident. It was a terrible performance. Hopefully he buries it. Hopefully it's a blip and not a trend. But that is the one thing that you're going to have to see from Jackson Arnold this weekend, is a more confident customer in the pocket. One final post here that we'll evaluate, and I kind of cheated on this one. It's two posts rolled into one. The initial poster, 1A Best, said, "We saw Spencer Rattler bail out of the pocket when he sensed pressure, and that limited his field vision. It threw off his mechanics as well. Jackson is doing the very same thing. We all know how the Rattler thing turned out." Then user LD23 tweeted, or I should say, quoted that post and said, "Rattler ended up being solid at SC and got drafted by the Saints. So it is fixable. That being said, Arnold needs to get his confidence back. The O-line being mid and not having having a bunch of backup wide receivers doesn't help either. Oh, and Luttrell is not it." So, two questions that I'll spin off of that post, Jesse. One, is it fair to acknowledge, or does this fall into the category of sunshine pumping if you say that, yes, this team has issues, but they're all fixable? And the second question would be, how much of this falls on the shoulders of Seth Luttrell?
I think the Spencer Rattler, comparison is an interesting one, just because I mean the way he started the 21 season was so not only unexpected, but that offense was anemic too. I mean, I even mentioned in a tweet yesterday that OU's yards per carry against Houston was its lowest since the West Virginia game that year when Spencer Rattler was the starter. That was a game OU won 16-13. I
Yep.
think the difference was Spencer Rattler already had a proven track record of success on the field. They had won the Big 12 the year before with him as the starting quarterback. And obviously Lincoln Riley was still on staff. There was just a little bit more cohesion. To me, this is all the summary of there being a disconnect and between the play calling, the schemes, the injuries, all of that, and all of that leading to a lack of confidence in Jackson Arnold. I don't think it's sunshine pumping to think that this is fixable, because there's a couple of things that they can easily fix. I mean, I think for one, Parker, this offense needs to slow down. And I think they need to be simpler. And I think the reality is, instead of trying to push Jackson Arnold outside his comfort zone, because I agree with you, there's no real reason for him to not be comfortable. But to me, I think it's acknowledging, hey, things are a mess right now. How can we make this simpler? I think they need to make his reads simpler. I think they need to make him easier. I think that's one thing you do, and I think that will fix a lot. And the other thing is, just don't get into third and longs. I mean, their average third They averaged 3rd and 8 against Temple and 3rd and 9 against Houston. So I think just simplify the offense a little bit. And I think for Seth Luttrell, I think overall he certainly deserves criticism. He seems at the end of the day, he took responsibility for how bad the offense looked on Saturday. There's a huge disconnect and it falls on the play caller. But to me, I think all of these issues were almost predictable. It was just way more awful than I could have ever imagined it would be. It looks way worse than I could have ever imagined it be. But the reality is, you have this Tulane game. Tulane is a decent team. That is still a game Oklahoma should win, and handedly. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I feel. I think you can fix all of this, but the fact remains you have to actually go and fix it. Yes, it is fixable, but you have to go fix it. All of Spencer Rattler's issues, if we want to stay with that parallel, all of his issues were fixable, but they didn't get fixed. Just because something is fixable doesn't mean it will get fixed. So I agree that has to be the focus this week as you game plan for Tulane. Make things as simple as possible on Arnold. You got to figure out some way to ensure that you're not playing behind the chains as often as you were on Saturday against Houston, because that just disadvantaged the offense from the get-go. Every single time they trotted out on the field, it was 2nd and long. And when you're faced with 2nd and long, you're certainly limited in terms of what you can dial up to be able to put your offense in a favorable 3rd down situation. So I think there is much to correct offensively. And yes, some of it starts with Luttrell. Some of it honestly starts with Arnold, because Luttrell can call the right plays. And if it's not executed properly by the quarterback, well, you're going to be inept as an offense. And the Sooners were inept Saturday. I don't think they are inept in general. There's a lot of talent on that roster offensively. And I also think that once they get close to full health, you get Nick Anderson, you get Branson Hickman back, guys like that, that's going to help significantly. Is it going to solve all your problems? Maybe not. But will it go a long way towards addressing some of the shortcomings that this Oklahoma offense has demonstrated in the first 2 games? Absolutely. Hopefully, some of your questions were answered throughout this video. If not, guess what? We got all week to keep talking about it, and we will here on this YouTube channel. Hopefully, you're already subscribed. And I would direct you all to ouinsider.com, where we've got comprehensive behind-the-scenes insider coverage of all things OU football, recruiting, basketball, softball, baseball. We got your fix when it comes to Oklahoma athletics, with information and intel and insights that nobody else in the market has. We hope to see you over there. For Jesse Crittenden, I'm Parker Thune. We'll catch you next time.